What if I told you that there's a simple technique used by Buddhist monks that allows them to never feel anger again? Imagine living without frustration, without resentment, without letting small things ruin your day. Seems impossible, right? Most of us live in a constant battle with our emotions. Someone cuts us off in traffic, and we feel rage boiling inside. A coworker makes a careless remark, and it lingers in our mind for hours. We replay arguments in our heads, fueling our frustration over and over. But what if anger wasn't something we had to fight? This is the story of Tenzin, a young monk who, despite his peaceful surroundings in the monastery, struggled with anger daily. He was frustrated by small things, people talking too loudly, interruptions in his meditation, even the sound of birds chirping outside his window. One day, his master noticed his frustration and decided to teach him a lesson that would change the way he saw anger forever. A lesson that, once you understand, might change how you deal with anger too. By the end of the story, you'll learn the same technique monks have used for centuries to let go of anger, not by suppressing it, but by understanding its true nature. So before we begin, ask yourself, how often does anger control your life? If you've ever felt trapped by frustration, if you've ever wanted to find true peace, then this story is for you. And if you want to hear more life-changing stories like this, subscribe to the channel and turn on the notifications, because sometimes all we need to change our lives is to learn how to let go. Let's begin. Tenzin had always been a devoted monk, dedicated to his spiritual path. But despite his years of meditation, he couldn't seem to control one thing: his anger. It wasn't the kind of explosive rage that made people shout or break things. No, his anger was quieter, but just as powerful. It was the irritation that crept in when someone disrupted his meditation, the frustration when things didn't go as planned, the resentment he felt when others didn't act the way he thought they should. He told himself he shouldn't feel this way. After all, monks were supposed to be peaceful, but the truth was he felt like a failure. One morning, as he was sweeping the monastery courtyard, he saw two younger monks laughing and playing nearby. They were supposed to be working, but instead they were joking around, completely ignoring their responsibilities. Tenzin clenched his jaw. Why didn't they take their practice seriously? He felt his irritation growing, but just as he was about to scold them, he felt a hand on his shoulder. It was his master, an elderly monk named Master Rinzen. "Tenzin," the master said, his voice calm. "What troubles you?" Tenzin hesitated, but then sighed. "Master, I know I shouldn't be angry, but I am. I try to meditate, I try to stay calm, but things like this, they always get to me." Master Rinzen smiled gently. "Then perhaps it is time for you to learn something important." Tenzin frowned. "Learn what?" The old monk simply motioned for him to follow. "I will show you," he said. And with that, they walked toward the monastery gardens, where a lesson awaited that would change the way Tenzin saw anger forever. Tenzin sat in silence, staring at the now clear water in the jar. The master's lesson made sense, but deep inside, he still had doubts. How do I stop myself from reacting? Tenzin finally asked. In the moment of anger, it feels impossible to just wait for it to settle. Master Rinzen chuckled. "Come with me." He led Tenzin to an open area in the monastery where a small fire burned in a stone pit. The flames flickered gently, dancing with the wind. "Anger," the master said, pointing to the fire, "is like this flame. It starts small, but if you keep feeding it, it grows." Tenzin watched as Rinzen picked up a handful of dry leaves and tossed them into the fire. Instantly, the flames flared up, growing hotter and more intense. "This is what happens when you hold onto anger," the master continued. "Every thought of resentment, every memory of injustice, every argument you replay in your mind, they are fuel. And the more you feed it, the stronger it burns." Tenzin swallowed hard. He had done exactly that. Held onto moments of frustration, replayed words that had angered him, allowed small grievances to grow into something much larger. Master Rinzen then did something surprising. He picked up a small bowl of water and slowly poured it over the fire. With a soft hiss, the flames died down, leaving behind nothing but glowing embers. Tenzin looked up. "So, How do I put out my anger? The master smiled. With awareness, just as water extinguishes fire, mindfulness cools anger. The moment you feel it rising, recognize it. Instead of reacting, observe it. Ask yourself, what am I feeding this fire? Tenzin thought for a moment, and if I stop feeding it, it burns out on its own. The master nodded. Exactly. For the first time, Tenzin felt a sense of control over his emotions. He had always believed anger was something that took over, but now, he saw it was something he had the power to manage. And this was only the second part of the lesson. The real test would come when he faced his greatest challenge yet. Days passed, and Tenzin practiced his master's teachings. He observed his emotions like the fire in the stone pit, watching how easily they could be fed or extinguished. But lessons in the monastery were one thing. Real life was another. One afternoon, while carrying a basket of fresh rice to the temple kitchen, Tenzin heard angry voices coming from the courtyard. As he approached, he saw two monks in a heated argument. Their faces were tense, their voices rising. Tenzin hesitated. Normally, he would have ignored them or walked away. But this time, he decided to listen, not just to their words, but to their emotions. He watched as one monk clenched his fists, breathing heavily. The other's face was red with frustration. Neither was truly hearing the other. They were only waiting for their turn to speak again. Then, one of them turned to Tenzin and demanded, "What do you think?" Tenzin's heart pounded. A few weeks ago, he would have reacted instantly, giving his own opinion, trying to prove who was right. But instead, he took a deep breath. He imagined a fire inside each monk. He saw how each word was like fuel, keeping their anger alive. Instead of answering, he remained silent for a moment. The two monks, expecting an immediate response, were caught off guard. Their breathing slowed. The tension between them softened, just slightly. Finally, Tenzin spoke. "Tell me, what is it that you truly want from each other?" The monks exchanged glances. For the first time, they seemed to actually hear the question. One sighed, rubbing his forehead. "I just want him to understand my point." The other hesitated. "And I want him to respect mine." Tenzin nodded. "Then speak to understand, not to win." A long silence followed. The fire had started to die out. Tenzin didn't need to prove anything. He didn't need to take a side. His silence had done more than words ever could. As he walked away, he realized this was the true test. Not just controlling his own anger, but helping others do the same. And for the first time, he understood what his master had truly been teaching him. Days turned into weeks, and Tenzin continued applying the teachings of his master. He no longer reacted to frustration the way he once did. Instead, he recognized anger as a passing flame, one that only burned if he chose to feed it. One evening, as the sun cast golden light over the monastery gardens, Master Rinzen called Tenzin to the meditation hall. "You have learned well," the master said, his voice calm. "But before I give you your final lesson, I have one last question for you." Tenzin nodded, ready. "When was the last time you felt anger?" The young monk thought carefully. He had faced challenges, disagreements, even frustrations, but true anger, the kind that consumed him, had not surfaced in weeks. "I cannot remember," he admitted. Master Rinzen smiled. "That is because you no longer cling to it." He gestured toward a nearby candle. "Tell me, Tenzin, can fire burn without fuel?" Tenzin shook his head. "Then tell me, can anger exist without attachment?" For a long moment, Tenzin was silent, and then he understood. Anger was never the problem. It was merely the result, the smoke from the fire. The true cause was always attachment, to being right, to control, to expectation. His master had never taught him to fight anger. He had taught him to understand it, to see its source, and to let it fade on its own. Tenzin bowed deeply. The lesson was complete. As he walked out of meditation hall, he noticed the world seemed lighter, as if a great burden had been lifted. The sky stretched endlessly above him. The wind carried the scent of jasmine, and in that moment, he felt a deep, quiet peace. He was free, not because he had eliminated anger, but because it no longer controlled him. And from that day forward, he never looked at anger the same way again. So, what does this story mean for you? We live in a world where anger feels like an unavoidable part of life. Disagreements with loved ones, frustrations at work, the chaos of traffic, or even heated online debates. It's everywhere. But what if I told you that, like Tenzin, you have the power to stop anger from controlling you? You see, anger isn't the enemy, it's a teacher. It shows up when something feels unfair, when expectations aren't met, or when we feel unheard. The problem isn't the anger itself, it's how we respond to it. Most of us react impulsively, clinging to the fire without ever questioning why it's burning. Tenzin discovered that anger only holds power when we feed it, when we insist on being right, when we demand that life unfold exactly as we want. But once he stopped fueling the flames, anger lost its grip. It became just another fleeting emotion, no more permanent than a cloud passing through the sky. And here's the truth. You can do the same. The next time anger rises within you, pause. Don't fight it. Instead, observe it. Ask yourself, what am I holding onto that makes this anger feel so strong? This simple act of awareness creates space, a moment of choice. You can hold onto the fire, letting it consume you, or you can let it go, freeing yourself from its weight. True strength isn't about never feeling anger. It's about recognizing it, understanding it, and choosing not to let it define you. If this story resonated with you, share it with someone who might need to hear it. A single lesson can ripple outward, changing lives in ways you might never imagine. If this story resonated with you, share it with someone who might need to hear it, because sometimes the smallest wisdom can create the biggest ripple effect. And if you're ready to dive deeper into transformative stories like this, subscribe to the channel and activate the bell. That way, you'll never miss an update, and you'll be the first to know when we release new content that challenges your perspective and helps you grow. If you found value in today's video, leaving a like is a simple but powerful way to support the channel, and it helps others discover these stories too. Asterisk. Thank you for joining me on this journey today. Until next time, stay mindful, stay open, and remember, peace begins the moment you choose to let go.